I'm having an awesome time with Myles Munroe, and I mean awesome time. If you missed yesterday and you missed Monday, you gotta call our ministry and see if they can send you a copy of the programs. It has been awesome. He's been talking about God's idea.
Yes.
God's big idea. Wow. I mean, the stuff you've been saying about the kingdom and God's idea, where he sat and said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. Let them have dominion. And then God's idea was polluted by the devil's idea.
Absolutely.
And now God is asking us to renew our minds. In other words, come back to God's own idea.
Absolutely.
And the whole incredible truth you brought about the kingdom of God.
Yes.
Okay, now one more time. God's big idea was, let them have dominion.
Yes. You know, like I said in the first program, there's nothing more powerful on earth than an idea. Ideas control everything we do. As a matter of fact, we are living our ideas every day. We call them ideologies. An ideology becomes a philosophy, and a philosophy becomes your lifestyle. And every human being, 6.7 billion of us watching this program today, many of you are sitting there in your houses maybe, your apartments, maybe in prison, in Europe, in Africa, wherever you are. You know, you are a victim of the philosophy of your culture. And the only way to change your lifestyle is to change your philosophy. The only way to change your philosophy is to change your ideology. And to change your ideology, you need to change your ideas. David calls this word idea precept. He says, Father, teach me your precepts that I may live correctly. You see, your ideas control your life. And what I try to do in this new book is to reintroduce an old idea that is as fresh as tomorrow. And that is, God's original idea was for earth to be a colony of heaven, colonized by his own children, filling the earth with his culture and his morality. In other words, God's plan was for earth to be an extension of heaven with the governing influence of heaven over earth. Christ used two terms that need to be explained. And you know, we talk about the kingdom, I become concerned because a lot of religious people begin to think, you know, oh, there's that kingdom stuff again. But let me just do this first. The only message that Jesus preached was the kingdom message. The question was asked, who do you say I am? They said, some say you are a prophet. Some say you are Elijah come back. Some say you are John the Baptist. In other words, you're a prophet, a prophet, a prophet. Now, the problem with being a prophet is you cannot have a kingdom.
You're only a spokesman.
Hang on.
Yeah.
So he turned to them and said, who do you say I am? And Peter says, after a few minutes, Peter says, you know, I believe you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Now, the word Christ, we know the word Christ, Mashiach, literally means anointed king. It doesn't just mean anointed one, anointed king. Christ says, upon that statement, I'm going to build my ecclesia. Ooh, and ecclesia is the Greek word. Actually, the word ecclesia was invented by the Greeks. That's why Christ couldn't say, I'm going to build the ecclesia, the church. He said, I'm going to build my church. Why? Because there were others. Ecclesia was the name the Greeks gave to the Senate of the kingdom of a king. The Senate was those who the king handpicked to be his council. And he would give them his mind, and they'd make it legislation. That group was called ecclesia. We translate into English as church. The church is actually God's agency for kingdom distribution of God's morals, values, and God's administration. That's why Paul says, from the beginning, it was God's intent that through the church, his wisdom be made manifest. Why? The church is actually a government agency of heaven.
I love it.
So Jesus says, upon the fact that I am a king, the king, I have the right now to build my kingdom. And then he says, the gates of hell shall not prevail against my kingdom. Yeah. Now, let me correct the concept here. I thought that meant that hell had gates, etc. But when I did my research, I was shocked to find out that the word hell there is the word Hades. Hades is the word for grave, the cemetery. Sure. There are three words that are translated hell in the Bible. The King James Version is a great translation, but it doesn't do a good job on these kinds of words. For example, the 3 words in the Bible for hell is the word Gehenna, Sheol, and Hades. Now, in the King James Version, we translate all of them as hell. So we don't know the difference. But they're very different. Hades is the grave. Sheol is the lake of fire, right? And Gehenna is the place of burning, of torment. And there was, of course, an area in that area that was actually known as Gehenna, which means the place of burning. And Christ is trying to describe the place of torment. Now, he used the term Hades when he spoke about establishing his government on earth. He calls it ecclesia. He says, and I will give you the keys of the kingdom. Next verse. Whatever you bind will be bind. Whatever you loose will be loose. Let me explain Hades to you. This one blew my mind. Christ is living under a kingdom of Rome. He was living in a colony, Palestine, in that area. And so he understood what it is to be under a kingdom and a colony. And he said these words. He says, it's a paraphrase. Caesar, who is king of Rome, can only rule your life to the point of the grave. In other words, a government can only take taxes from you up to the cemetery. They can only control your life up to the cemetery. Once a person goes to the graveyard, you cannot get taxes from them. You can't get them to pay bills. They can't do nothing. In other words, the control of a government over a citizen ends in the cemetery. Watch Christ. Christ says, let me tell you something. My kingdom is greater than Caesar's because it doesn't end with the cemetery. He says the gates of Hades. That means the graveyard cannot stop my influence over my citizens' lives. So whether you live or die, it doesn't matter. You are still under his government influence. So that's why death is not a fearful thing to a kingdom citizen. Because on either side of the grave, you are still under the king's authority. That's why he says to live is Christ and to die is gain. There's no difference between the two. So death, he takes away the fear of death because his government doesn't end at the cemetery. His kingdom has citizens on both sides of the grave. So whether you live today or die tomorrow, it doesn't matter. If you are in the kingdom of God, his authority over your life remains constant. That's why death has no more sting, the grave has no more victory, because his kingdom, his government rules over your life on both sides of the cemetery.
Now, before we talk about how to colonize, what is a colony? Just give us the headline.
A colony is a group of immigrants in a foreign territory who are under their home country. And that's why Christ didn't come until 4,000 years after Adam sinned. Because God was waiting for the Roman Empire, which was a prototype of his kingdom, to be established. Scripture says in the fullness of time, God sent forth his son. The Romans were the first kingdom on earth to establish colonization. Every other kingdom would control people, uproot them, and take them back to their territories. The Romans did the opposite. They would take over territory and send a governor to live in the territory and make the people's Romans. That's what the book is about. So when Christ came to earth, Christ was the king coming back to the territory with the governor on the inside to bring the kingdom back to earth. Now, think about this then. Colonization, the Romans had a system. Whenever they took over a territory, the Roman king would always send 300 Roman citizens, ship them out to live in the territory that they just took over. 300. Why? Because the Romans figured out a system. If 300 people are in a territory, that's enough to create a culture.
Dear Lord.
That's why God didn't need to put 1 million people on earth at the beginning. One with everybody in him was enough. So Adam had everybody in his body, and God took this one man, put him on the whole planet, and then said, dominate it for me. Why? Because inside that one body was everybody. And so now we've got the citizens. A colony is a group of citizens in a foreign territory, but they are not under the government of the territory. They are under the government, their allegiance to the government that they are from. This is why he's supposed to be in the world, but not of the world. You know, we're supposed to be under a different kingdom. Even though we live on planet Earth, our government is in heaven. This is why when they asked Jesus, where did you come from? He was born in Bethlehem, grew up in Nazareth, and ministered in Capernaum. His answer was, I came down from heaven.
What is so remarkable is what he said on another program, is when God created Adam, in him was the kingdom. But then the devil came,
yes, sir,
and messed all that up.
Contaminated up.
Yeah. So now God says, renew your mind. In other words, get back to the original idea of God.
And this is important for